That sounds good. So I want to say welcome and thank you all for coming tonight. We sincerely appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedule to join us and for taking the time to review the information that's been provided on the study's webpage. I know that there was a 23-minute long video, and we do want to say thank you for taking the time to watch that. We're not going to be showing that video tonight. This session is just building upon the information that was in there, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about any of the ideas or questions that you have based on some of the concepts and information that was in that video. But if you have not had a chance to view it, that video will remain on our webpage for a while, so you could certainly go back and watch it if you have not had a chance to see it. But that will be publicly available for at least a couple more weeks on the website after this meeting. On the webpage too, there is a comment form. You could certainly always go to that webpage to submit a comment. There's a frequently asked questions document, and then there are the slides as a PDF of a slide deck of the presentation that you can look at and zoom in closer on some of the concepts and so forth if you were interested in looking at things in more detail. But again, thank you for taking the time to meet with us tonight. My name is Mike Alexander. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. There are two other staff here tonight that are helping. I want to introduce Megan Vitale. She's a principal transportation planner with SMTC, and Andrew Frazier is a senior transportation analyst with SMTC. Both of those individuals have been participating on this study for the last year and a half, and they are an outstanding team. We're very blessed to have them. They bring outstanding skill sets, so they're a wonderful resource for us to work with. And they're going to be helping with some of the behind the scenes tonight as far as queuing up individuals for the questions and answers. Everybody, as they entered in the room, you should have seen a little window pop up saying that this meeting is being recorded. We do that for documentation purposes, and it gives us the ability to take meeting notes afterwards. All the comments and questions will be documented in the report. We are working on a report now, and the study is ongoing, and we anticipate having it complete by the summer of this year. But we're at a point in the process right now where we have some ideas that we want to share with the public, and they're just ideas. There's nothing being proposed. These are all just conceptual examples, and I'll go into that in another minute or so into a little bit more detail. But I do want to say that as an agency, we are a planning agency. We receive federal transportation funds, and the funds that we receive get used just for planning purposes. They don't get spent on making improvements to the roadways. It's just for conducting these types of plans. And the town, in conjunction with the Syracuse-Onondaga County Planning Agency, submitted a joint application requesting our assistance to help with this study on their behalf. So we're doing this on the behalf of the community. There's no cost to the local government other than some participation, some in-kind services that the town would participate during some of our meetings that we've had. We work with the study advisory committee because roads are owned by different entities. In this case, US 11 is owned by the New York State Department of Transportation. So they've been involved on our study advisory committee. The Onondaga County Department of Transportation is another road owner. And there's a couple roads, Lemoyne Ave, Malden, Malloy Road, for instance, are county-owned facilities. And the town certainly owns the vast majority of the roads within the study area, that being the local roads surrounding within the neighborhoods. So that the town is a significant player as well, of course, from that standpoint. And they also control the land use and the zoning and so on. So they're an important entity and have been very closely involved in this planning process. Additionally, I mentioned the county planning was the joint applicant. So the county planning agency has been involved on our study advisory committee. And then lastly, Central, the bus agency, has also been involved in all the meetings to provide the viewpoint of the bus service and transit. So I want to thank all of them for their ongoing participation. And as I mentioned, this has been going on for just over a year and a half now. And we've had several meetings. The town has given us a vision that they would ask us to essentially calculate the build out for and see whether or not, if you were to do a full build out of the corridor per the vision, which is based on a whole bunch of assumptions, including a hypothetical zone change, and there's no proposal to change the zoning or anything at this point. This is just a visioning exercise. What if you changed the corridor zoning from C3 commercial to a R5 mixed use residential? What type of development patterns could you get? Would the town feels that those development patterns that you would get under an R5 mixed use zone would more closely align what their vision is for the corridors, like a town center, land use development patterns that could occur over time. So we looked at an R5 zone. We looked at a few areas as you guys saw in the video, some large areas, and we did a build out for those just to kind of see what could fit potentially within these 4 locations. And then based on that, that gave us information about the number of households, the number of jobs that could come into the area. Looking out to the year 2050, we were able to input that information into our travel demand model. And then the model gave us 2 outputs. It gave us the % change in traffic volume, and it also gave us the volume to capacity ratio. And the question being, if the corridor was developed to its maximum potential, could there be significant changes made to the road network to allow for other enhancements? And by significant changes, one question would be, can we keep the road the same, essentially same number of lanes and accommodate some of these improvements? Another question would be, what if you were able to reduce the number of travel lanes, thus opening up more space for additional enhancements? Is that an option? And the long and short of it is that when we ran our full build calculations and ran it through the model suggests that there's excess capacity, both currently and in the future, under all the future scenarios that we've looked at. So from a planning level standpoint, what that does is it suggests that it's not unreasonable at this point to consider keeping the road the same, or perhaps making some modifications to the roads by reducing travel lanes, 1 in each direction. We also looked at modifications to 1 block of Lemoyne Ave by redirecting Lemoyne via Boulevard Street to US 11 as part of that scenario. And even under that concept, there's still excess capacity throughout the road network. So again, from a planning level standpoint, the question was answered. It's not unreasonable to consider these ideas at this point. We fully recognize that this is a planning level study and not an engineering level study. It's not an engineering assessment. Those assessments would have to take place if the community and if the road owners were interested in considering any of these changes further in the future. So those would be subsequent steps, but hypothetically, based on the vision that was presented, based on the assumptions that went into the hypothetical zone change and so forth, everything, all the ideas that were presented in the presentation passed what we refer to as a fatal flaw assessment. There were no fatal flaws in any of these ideas. So we move forward with just illustrating what things could look like. The illustrations that you saw, they're just conceptual examples. They're not site plans. Nothing is being proposed to be developed. And the town, the various road owners, the state, the county, and so forth, are under no obligation to make any changes. We just wanted to illustrate what things could look like if things were to change, since it was deemed to be not unreasonable at this point. And those illustrations give us the ability to share some ideas and to certainly set the stage for having a discussion with the community about whether or not they like these ideas, if there's anything that they would change or add and so forth. So that is my overview right now. Again, I do want to say thank you again. As far as a housekeeping item, I'll explain to you a little bit how this will work. So as you guys entered into the Zoom session, everybody was muted. What we'll do is when it comes time for the question and answer, we'll ask that you please go down to, if you bring your cursor down to the bottom, you'll see that there is a little reactions tab. And if you click on that, a dialog window will open up and it'll say raise hand. So when it comes time to asking questions, if you're interested in making a comment or asking a question, you would just click raise hand and you'll be queued up into our system, and we'll answer, based on a first come, first serve, who clicked the fastest, so to speak. And we'll get through all the questions. I do want to thank each of you too who have already submitted some comments and questions. We did receive several, and I'll go over what some of those topics are right before we get started with opening it up to everybody. That way, in case some of these items are already, perhaps they already will address some of the questions that you're coming forth with. But I do want to say that this video is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel, and that recording will exist on our YouTube page, so that you can certainly always come back to this video as well and watch it again if you needed to hear something again or wanted to reference it for whatever reason. It is being recorded, and I know that there are folks tonight joining us via the YouTube station, so I just want to say thank you. And if you do have any comments that arise, those who are watching it via YouTube, again, you can either email me or email go to the study's website, and there's a comment form there, and there's an email information there. So as far as the email address, you can email us at contactus@smtcmpo.org. So that should take care of our housekeeping items. Let me just address this real quick. So a few of you had, as I mentioned, submitted some comments ahead of time. So again, thank you for doing that. I'll just list through what we received so far. There was a comment that was received. There's some concerns about some cut-through traffic that has been occurring on Mattydale Ave. And there's concerns about not only vehicles and cars, but some of the trucks that might be cutting through. Some folks feel that that people are using that as a cut-through to bypass the light on Malloy Road. And there's concerns with safety that were expressed. The Bessie Reardon Apartments, which is a senior housing complex, was mentioned, and it was indicated that some of the residents of that housing complex walk or use wheelchairs and so forth along the roadway. So the concern is, any additional traffic along the road was of concern. So that was one item that was brought to our attention. Another was there was a comment that somebody was interested in not seeing any traffic increase on Lemoyne Ave or on Lemoyne Street. So we're noting that as well. Another one was in reference to public transit services and possibilities. It's something that, as a mobility study, we're looking at all modes of travel. So in addition to moving people around in cars, we're looking at how can things be improved for access for buses and so forth, as well as for those who bike and walk along the corridor. So this is a comprehensive study in that we're trying to improve mobility for all road users. We do see a lot of foot traffic out there, a lot of bike traffic, and we know that there's a lot of individuals that don't have access to cars and rely on other modes of travel. So one of the major objectives of considering road improvements is to make enhancements that would benefit all of these road users. So that was why one of the questions that we were trying to ask is it possible to reduce travel lanes and repurpose some of that space for, perhaps bike lanes or a shared use path or on-street parking and so forth, a variety of other enhancements. You could do additional sidewalks and streetscaping and street trees and so on. So there's a variety of different types of enhancements that could occur. And you would have the ability to do some of those enhancements if you keep the road the same, but certainly if you were to repurpose some of that lane space for other uses, that there might be more opportunities afforded for enhancements. So that's why that question was asked. And then the fourth comment was whether or not it was a question of whether or not we modeled a lane reduction for 2 or more lanes. As you may recall from the video, we looked at reducing US 11 by a single lane of traffic northbound and a single lane of traffic southbound, and then the redirecting of Lemoyne to Boulevard Street between Boulevard Street and US 11. And the answer to that is no. We just looked at the lane reduction, the single lane reduction for US 11. There's a variety of reasons for that. One, this is a US route, it's owned by the state, so you certainly have to maintain a certain level of capacity along the system. It certainly parallels I-81, and looking at the history of the road does serve a very important purpose as far as its utilization, and the traffic volumes that are on the road, although you're getting into the upper limit of the threshold of what you could do for a road diet. So a road diet typically would reduce a road network down to one lane in each direction and have a center turn lane, which is referred to as a two-way left turn lane, a twiddle. But the volume, the traffic volume on the road as it currently exists is right at that threshold where you would certainly be close to not having it be feasible to do. But that's something that it wasn't necessarily a concern of the study as far as reducing it down that much traffic. And then the other indication, that being the state, who's been a partner at the table, has indicated that they've put a lot of investment into the center median, and by reducing the number of travel lanes, that, like I indicated, it would very much require a center turn lane, and that would require the center median to be modified. And the state has indicated, because of all the money that they've spent on the drainage and the improvements to the center median, that at this point in time, they're willing to listen to a study that would consider a lane reduction in either direction on the outer lanes. And that's what they're comfortable with at this point in time, looking into doing so. So that was one of the items there. They did bring up the question about were roundabouts considered and other roadways as being possible linkages for things. They identified Roxborough Road, and Roxborough Road was identified in one of the concepts by the skating rink as being enhanced as a point of access for the properties along US 11 over there. Roundabouts were considered, but because we're still looking at 2 lanes in each direction under the concepts, to have a 2-lane roundabout proves problematic in some regards when it comes to pedestrian movements and bicycle movements. It's also challenging to some level for vehicles that aren't accustomed to the area. Roundabouts are wonderful things, and they do work extremely well in certain situations, in certain settings, and they go a long way at reducing crash severity. But when you have a 2-lane roundabout on a more of a heavily trafficked road, and if you're trying to balance the pedestrian and the bicycle movements, that wasn't at this point deemed anything that we were going to look at into further. But that's not to say that if things were to change in the future, there's always the possibility that under the engineering level that could be considered for a very specific location. And those are the types of things that we would work out in future subsequent studies and engineering assessments should things advance in the future. So that covers what was essentially brought up. There was some additional information we received from some commenters. Some information about the history of the local area, and in particular, the Frank Baum property. There is a lot of interesting information that was provided to me today, as a matter of fact. So I very much appreciate that feedback and that information, and we'll be able to incorporate some more of that historical documentation into the report. So I think that's wonderful, and that'll be a good resource for reference in the future. So, so with that, I do have some pointed questions I could ask, but I've done enough talking at this point. What I'd like to do is I would like to just open this up for anybody who is interested in asking a question or providing a comment, and we'll be happy to answer everything that we possibly can. If there's something that we can't answer tonight, if we have to get back to you, we'd be happy to get back to you. And all the information and all the documentation will be in the final report, including any responses that we give and all the questions and so forth will be captured and pulled together and documented in the final report. So with that, I'd be happy to encourage you to go down to the reaction button and to raise your hand, and we'll be very happy to let you speak. You will receive if you click the raise hand button, and in the order that you're chosen, you will receive a request to unmute yourself. So you just click unmute, and then you can go ahead and start asking the questions. So is there anybody that would like to ask any questions?
You can also send us a chat, or if the raise hand function isn't working for you, if you turn your camera on and just wave, we'll try to call on you. Okay, we got one. All right, so you should see, Dominic, you should see something that asks you to unmute now.
How we doing? I'm Dominic Cicerelli. I got a couple questions. So when you do these studies, obviously, I'm guessing it's mainly based off of statistically, like when you've done other case studies for certain areas to see it, because I'm sure you don't actually like necessarily drive the routes to see like what it would change if you like, you know, did it 2 lanes, or like what you want to do from the boulevard to like the top of like Lemoyne Ave there, make that like a green space. So, I mean, realistically, I think to do something like that, it's, you know, would it be beneficial to maybe block those roads for like a day or two and see, you know, what kind of traffic it might actually cause for something like that? I get the green space. That's kind of like the thing right now. But at the same time, I mean, I travel that road every day. I go to and from work that way and coming back. So to me, I mean, it's beneficial. I know, you know, obviously people could say, well, you can just go down Brewerton and cut over Factory and then, you know, go that way or whatever. But, you know, I just think that particular intersection, it's weird. Don't get me wrong, but it's been working. I've lived in Mattydale, you know, 22 years now, and I rarely see accidents anywhere there or on Route 11, and knock wood. I mean, that's, you know, so I just feel like more commotion and more changing directions, you're going to have more issues, I think. I mean, maybe you don't, I don't know, but I just think the study, if it's going to be done right, you should block those roads off for like a week and see what people do, and then say, you know, make the call from there.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of thoughts in response to that. The Lemoyne Ave rerouting closure, that one block, you know, that would be based on whether or not there was development interest to make any type of improvements to that area. So so a lot would have to occur, of course. A few things. We worked with the county DOT who owns Lemoyne Ave, and the county has raised several concerns and several issues about any of the concepts that we're showing. They recognize that, yeah, based on the planning level assessment, it seems reasonable, but they do have concerns about how it would affect their highway network and so forth, as it ties in with Malloy and elsewhere down Factory Ave and so on. And so they asked us to look and do a few additional assessments with our model to determine how some of the surrounding intersections would work and so on. And we've done that. And so far, everything is still, based on our assessment, is looking okay. So this is kind of like step one, of course.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so that would be the precursor. And that was just shown as an example if there was any development interest. Certainly that Lemoyne Ave can certainly stay exactly as it is. And the biggest factor would be if somebody wanted to develop it. If that was to occur, several other things would have to occur as well. So for instance, the county DOT indicated that they would require that the town take ownership of Lemoyne Ave south of there, between Boulevard Street right down to Factory Ave. So that was made known as part of this process. Then there's other questions that you've got the throughway bridge and so forth, and that's a big expensive facility and so on. So there'd be a lot of discussions that would have to occur, of course, to consider all of those elements. As far as testing the water, so to speak, I love the suggestion of, you know, close it off, see how it works. And in some communities, they do that with certain types of things. And just using US 11 as an example, the thought with reducing US 11, if it were to ever occur, is that one possibility is that you could restripe US 11, keep US 11 essentially the same width that it is. Don't spend any money redesigning it, bringing in the curbs at this point. You essentially restripe it as 2 lanes, and then you repurpose that other lane space with additional pavement markings. It's much more cost effective than re-engineering the whole road. And then you can test it out that way, so to speak. And it gives you the chance to kind of try it before you buy it, so to speak. And
That's almost like what they did on Salina Street, like the Little Italy section over
yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah. And they did that on Genesee Street in the city. I think it was East Genesee Street. They did a road diet out there where they had it 4 lanes, and they reduced it to the single lane in each direction with the center turn lane. And they kept the road exactly the same. They just milled up the old pavement markings, and they restriped it because paint is a lot cheaper than having to move curbs and redeal with drainage and so forth. So things can be done in phases over time. And that is a little bit more palatable for road owners to consider when you're talking such a massive facility as US 11, because of course it's 6 lanes wide in the center portion, and it branches out, gets 4 lanes wide in some areas and so forth. And so, the closure of Lemoyne, testing that out, I'd have to look to see what the rules and regs are for something like that. I'm sure something like that has occurred in places, because again, I know that like cities have, some cities do a lot of different testing of different types of pavement markings. They might, where a crosswalk might go in, they might do a bump out, and they might paint it ahead of time before they build anything. And it shortens the crossing in between the 2 side streets. So it's kind of like these try and buy kind of things. They might put up temporary bollards or something like that to narrow it down to test things. But closing a road, I mean, that would be something I'd have to look into more, but I know logically what you're saying makes sense. Test it out, see if it works.
I mean,
Mike, I would just add to that. We did show in the concept for that the possibility of new signals at either Richfield or Boulevard Street. So with that possible closure of Lemoyne, it's likely that a new signal would be needed. So I would be concerned that just closing that temporarily without appropriate other mitigation measures would almost be setting it up to fail.
Yeah.
But, no, I get that. But I mean, ideally, if you're going to be doing something like that, it is going to kind of be the same concept. But one thing that I did think of is, realistically, I mean, you're going to be doing the sidewalks along the side. There's already sidewalks kind of there, but now this would just be, bringing them back to life, essentially. You know what I mean? Going up from Malloy all the way up to 11. And then the idea of, basically the same concept with Salina, downtown. I mean, that makes sense because you're really not changing anything, but you're still giving it that like village vibe, I guess you could say, because essentially you don't really need 3 lanes going down the middle of Mattydale. It does get kind of crazy sometimes, but it's just this one intersection when you get into this, little wishbone here in the, where it's, Brewerton and then Lemoyne Ave. That's going to be the main, kind of botched area, which has always been, but it's worked. And I know they want to try to incorporate like the bike trail to like kind of cut through, the sidewalks and that. So one thing that I had thought of was, basically you do have some green space over there between Lemoyne Ave, and then there's that little road that kind of runs along with it. And there's that green space right there. So you could essentially make the same concept like they did on Erie Boulevard, just put literally a bike trail right down the middle of that. Now people are off the side of the road, and then they can cut right back into, the sidewalks that are running up a little bit off the end of Lemoyne Ave to Malloy. You know what I mean? Just some easier concepts, really. It's not like, you're reinventing the wheel. You're just simply adding something to that's already existing. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. And I will say too, in our discussions with the county DOT, one suggestion that they had in mind was they suggested late in the game about the possibility of reducing a travel lane in each direction on Lemoyne instead of closing Lemoyne off entirely. So it'd be 1 lane instead of 2 lanes in each direction. And that certainly could work. And again, looking at what the study that we did, that's kind of a worst case scenario. And one could assume that if you close the road and the capacities on all the surrounding road networks still work, than if you were to keep the road open, in this case, Lemoyne, and just reduce it one travel lane in each direction. Again, it will, in theory, work. So we did kind of like the worst case scenario, if you would. So there's definitely a lot of value in also considering that as a possible option, reducing the number of travel lanes instead of closing off that block entirely, because then that does the same thing. It gives you the ability to incorporate the bikeways or the sidewalks, or it opens up additional space as well. But at this point, it doesn't necessarily need to be modeled on our side with their travel demand model, because we've taken it one step further as a worst case scenario and just closed it to see. So from that standpoint. So with all that being said, I think with your feedback, and I think with the feedback from the county, we will document in the report that these other ideas are also, interested to be explored as well. So that's, I think this type of feedback is so helpful and so important. And again, the idea of closing this road off was just kind of a what if. We have the ability to model it. Our model is a regional travel demand model, and it has the ability to ask these types of what if questions and these big questions at this point. We can put our resources to it, and before somebody went and re-engineered the whole thing and spent a lot of money on things, let us ask this question to see if it would even work. And in this case, it still continues to work and operate based on the capacity levels.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, the other thing that I look at too is obviously like the business side of it, because even though the government's not really a business, I get all that, but on the business side of it, now you're talking about maintaining roads and doing this, so you're actually like costing the town essentially more, where if you did the 2-lane, like you said, even if you just changed it, where if you ended up changing any of this and you made it 1 or 2 lanes where it's one way up, one way down, at least it's still being maintained and sensed by the county, not by the town. Because now if you keep everything the way that it is and maybe just realign it, maybe add some green space, whatever the case is, now at least you're still saving the taxpayers money. No different than like what you said, breaking it down to 2 lanes, but then making it like the same way like Salina Street, where you're just painting the road. You're not actually costing the taxpayers more, where you're literally cutting it down and getting rid of a whole lane. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So
yeah, no, these are all very important factors. I mean, there's the ownership element. If that does change, like you said, there's a cost to the town associated with that.
It's a long-term thing. Yeah. Short-term, I mean, it looks good right up front. You're like, oh, this is great. But then long-term, it's costing the taxpayers more money for the town,
I just wanted to clarify that the change in ownership is not for Route 11.
No. I know that.
Okay.
I'm talking about the Lemoyne Ave down here. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's a very short segment, but
no, I know, but still, over time, it's going to cost money to maintain it. So.
Oh, and then the real big question always comes down to the bridge. Bridges over the thruway. That's a very expensive facility. So if the functional classification were to change of that road, i.e. if the road doesn't have as much traffic on it, so to speak, is it justified to have that bridge? And that would be another big question of cost and so forth. But at the same time, on the flip side of that coin is what the model is suggesting at this point is that it may not be unreasonable to consider even modifying that section of the road to where the bridge may or may not be relevant anymore. So that begs another question, is that bridge necessary? And that's something that we did not model, but that's something that in theory we could model, because you've got the Route 11 bridge, which is a stone's throw away from the Lemoyne Ave bridge. And they're very close together. They're both very expensive facilities. And that's kind of a question in and of itself, like, is it necessary to have both bridges? And of course, the public's going to say yes, because we want to maintain our access for everything. But at the same time, the reality is those bridges are so close together, you essentially drive around the block and you can access either one of them. So those are cost savings too. And that's a throughway facility, and they're a whole nother entity as a road owner that would have to be involved in those discussions and so forth. But recognizing that US 11 is a state route, it's a US route, you have to maintain certain levels of capacity and access and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think one other thing though that might help too is because I know like a lot of truck drivers and stuff, they do go down Lemoyne Ave or go up and over the bridge and things like that. So it might be beneficial too to like reach out to people that do transportation and do carry loads through to see what is your thoughts if you were to take out that, or to, cut it down where now they might have to go down, Brewerton and then cut over to Factory or whatever the case may be. Again, I know it's just concepts that you're putting together, and I understand, nothing's, written in stone, nothing's finalized, but obviously if it's going to come to a fruition, you just want to make sure that all ends are really, looked at, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a outstanding comment.
So, and any changes to Lemoyne as shown in that concept are really predicated on a development proposal, not
Oh, yeah.
on a proposal just to the north of where that current plaza is. So the intent wasn't really to add green space. The intent was to show that as a development opportunity. And that would potentially, to open up that space, need that road closure.
Okay. So what you're saying was it's not so much being like part of the green space. It was more like development side of it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
The impetus behind that was to create another parcel for
Gotcha.
development where there could be more of a town center style development. So
Gotcha.
it's not close the road just to close the road. It was to develop this parcel that road closure might be necessary. Again, conceptually, but the goal there was to create an opportunity for more development along the Route 11 frontage.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I mean, being that it wouldn't be so much just a green space, I mean, I don't know if I really agree with putting development there, because now you're going to run into issues like they did on 31 or Route 11 up in Cicero, where you have like Chick-fil-A and Starbucks like all on top of each other. And if anybody's been up there, I mean, it's awful unless it's Sunday and Chick-fil-A is closed. I mean, that's just my opinion. So, and then at the same time, you have these businesses on the backside of Lemoyne Ave, that are on that side of the plaza that now wouldn't get the exposure that they need to, because you cut the road off. You know what I mean? So I think then at that point, you just leave it where if you're going to change it, you just change it to one lane up, one lane down, or just leave it the way it is. Add a little bike trail off to the side there and just call it a day. So it saves everybody money. We got money we can spend other places,
So we actually have a question that is about development. So I think we got to move on from the Lemoyne Ave question at the moment, but we can come back to that if there are other questions about that. But Teresa asked, the plan assumes a large number of buildings with retail and residential spaces. Based on other projects, have you seen where this many buildings actually end up being occupied? I ask because we already have so many empty and unused buildings. Would some more park-like places be considered in their place? So I think that the concern, and Teresa, I can send you a request to unmute if you want to expand on that at all. But I think the question is just about the viability of future development, or the likelihood of future development, and particularly that mixed use style development that we are showing. So Teresa, did you want to add anything, or Mike, do you want to just?
I can jump in. I don't want to cut off Teresa in case you wanted to add anything or clarify, but I see that Teresa, you're unmuted. I don't know if you want to chime in.
She said, no, that's fine. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So,
okay.
No, I think it's an outstanding question, because that comes back to the, the practicality of things and so forth. So it goes back to the intent of what we were trying to do. We wanted to figure out what would be kind of a worst case scenario. And by worst case, meaning like, what's the best, if things were to develop to the maximum potential under that hypothetical R5 zoning, how much development could you fit within these areas? And what you'll see, if you're to look at the existing conditions, like at the Kmart Plaza, the Mattydale Shopping Plaza, for instance, you've got several 100,000 square feet of retail space within that area. And under the R5, that changes drastically to the types of uses that are being shown in there. There's three or four mixed use buildings. So the mixed use would be ground floor commercial, office, or restaurant. And the square footage drops drastically to like 20,000 square feet from the several 100,000 that currently exist. As far as the number of units on that site, I'd have to double check, because I believe 90 units, 60 or 90 units, one to two. And again, that's based on what the maximum development that the zoning would allow. As far as whether or not that's practical, would things, the occupancy be full? I mean, those are market conditions, of course. I think it's a good question. What we needed to do in order for our assessment is to figure out the maximum development. That way we could figure out how much traffic would increase as a result of the worst case maximum development potential. And if the road functions well under that condition, then the assumption is if somebody was to come in and propose something similar or less, we know from the get-go that the road network would be able to handle it. And then the market conditions, the economy at the time, and so forth, those would be the factors where the developers would know how many units that they would need to sell and how many are reasonable to try to build and so forth. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if there's anything else that, Megan, if you want to add anything to that, but again, the purpose of us doing the maximum build out wasn't like a pie in the sky, oh, this is what can come into this area. What it's saying is this is what could come into the area if the market supported it, and if somebody proposed it. This is a very reasonable assumption of the total maximum development that you could use. So it's a worst case, but chances are something with fewer units or square footage would likely be more realistic as something that would come in. But and what we did when we developed the concepts as well, so they're drawn to like approximate scale. We've got the building footprints all scaled out. We've got the number of stories. We've kept it at 2. We had discussions with the airport, and the FAA has rules and regulations about building height in the corridor. And there's a couple flight paths with the airplanes that they're concerned. So we kept things at 2 stories instead of 3 from that standpoint. And what that did was initially we were considering 3 stories, and there was fewer buildings as a result. But then when it became 2 stories, it became additional buildings. So those were factors. And I had another point, but it's eluding me, so I apologize. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. And feel free to type in the chat pod if there's anything else that you would like clarification on.
Yep, she said, okay, I understand, thanks.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Jennifer, I can unmute you if you want to ask your question. Nobody else has their hand up. So no, she wrote in the chat that she also has a question about Lemoyne, which is fine. We can come back to that. I just wanted to give other people a chance if there was anything else.
I also didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole either, because I sort of disagree with Dominic, as I agree with some parts too, but I would love to see that space developed. I think it's a ridiculous section where we have 3 roads going into the one there. To me, I've always hated it, and I've lived in Mattydale my entire life. But my question kind of came up when you were talking about the bridge, and like if it ever came up that this bridge would be closed because there's another one right there. So I wonder how that works in kind of looking down the road and researching this out, because it would be a shame to not develop that section, to not close that road, and then have a couple of years down the road somebody say, okay, we're going to close this bridge and block that off. And we could have done that. So how does that work in kind of figuring out what's going to happen there with that bridge? And if that's like if I'm too far down the rabbit hole, just tell me to shut up.
No, it's a great question. And it's something that, as far as the bridge is concerned, I mean, that kind of conversation evolved out of the question of like the cost benefit things. And when you talk about changing road ownerships from a county highway down to a local road, should that occur with Lemoyne, knowing that portion of the road that would change ownership to the town would now include a 4-lane wide bridge over the New York State Thruway. Those are the cost benefit kind of discussions, high level stuff that become self-evident as questions. we do have the capability, if the road owners were interested in having us model that, we could model what would happen if you were to close that bridge, for instance, and force everything to turn at, let's say, Factory Ave, Lemoyne to Factory to US 11, and like force that movement. We could certainly model that just to see how things would operate. Because right now, the way it's currently modeled is that some of that traffic can turn at Factory Ave as it comes north, for instance, and some of it can continue, go across the bridge and turn at Boulevard Street. So that's how it's currently modeled. We could force the issue by closing the bridge, so to speak, just to see what the model would show for something like that. But that was not done as part of this study. Again, the main purpose of this study is to look at mobility enhancements along US 11, and the idea of Lemoyne kind of came up as a side thing, and it's generating a lot of excitement and you know, and discussion. But again, it's just one of these side questions that came up, like knowing that the intersection there is skewed and it's so challenging. And at one point, one location, I remember counting, you got to cross essentially 7 different roads to walk across the street at that location, where all the roads converge together, because you've got Old Bruton Road, you got northbound US 11, southbound US 11, northbound you know, Lemoyne, and so on. And it just, the list goes on and on. So it became a natural question. What if this spaghetti mess somehow went away? What options would there be to enhance things? And knowing that that central part of Mattydale is like the traditional town center, with all the buildings built up to the road, you've got you've got a lot of civic uses in Salina Civic Center there. You've got the movie theater and stuff, and it's like that traditional heart of the community. The thought was if you were to close that land off, you could create that land now for that new development, as we show in that concept, the buildings A, B, and C, and then that can continue along the street frontage and continue that feeling of a mixed-use business corridor, an extension of it. So, but yeah, circling back to the throughway bridge, I mean, that could be studied as part of a separate study if that was to ever become a question. And I think something like that would, if a developer ever came to the town and said, hey, I would love to, I see is this concept in this plan, I would love to build that. You know, I've got all this money, let's do it, let's make it happen. I think those are the types of subsequent studies that would have to come out of those discussions. You know, and the zoning would have to change, land ownership between the county and the town would have to change. I mean, so many things would have to change. That's what makes this kind of fun right now at this point, is it's all visioning. You know, nothing's proposed, nothing's, you know, nobody's on the hook for anything. Everything that's coming out of this is just saying whether or not things are feasible at this point. And so far, things are seeming feasible.
And the state has said that, you know, a bridge closure would be considered at the point where the bridge really needs a lot of work or replacement. And that's the point where you would really make that assessment. Is it worth doing that work? Is it worth replacing it or closing it? It wouldn't likely just be closed.
Right. I guess that's what I mean. Like, you know, assessing the bridge for, you know, its life expectancy. And if it really only looks to have another 5 years in it, would it be beneficial to just close Lemoyne? And if it's going to go that way anyway, I guess that was kind of my thought process, but thank you.
Yeah.
And we can go to Benjamin. I'll send you a request to unmute.
Okay, great, thank you. So I had a couple comments. So I'm coming to this discussion as one, I am a resident of Mattydale, but also I am a commercial property owner. So I own 2 properties along the corridor of Route 11 that are being discussed. And I had a couple points of feedback. I'm also the person who proposed or who asked if the 1 lane each way with the roundabouts was considered. And one thing, well, so first of all, I support all the changes that were, I guess not proposed, but being considered. And a big concern of mine is that with government projects, it's not that we're going to overcommit or move too fast or make a mistake changing something. It's that we're going to talk about it for the next 25 years or something. Like the I-81 project, I know it's bigger, but I was a child when I first started hearing about it. And nothing has changed yet. I know the governor says things are going to change fast now, and we'll see. So if I had a choice between breaking ground tomorrow on this project or having a long continued debate, I'd say let's go, let's do it. But that being said, after considering some of the things you said, Michael, I know we're not making decisions here, but just if anyone ever views this in the future. In the proposal, a lot of the town center pictures that were shown, so 11 is 6 to 8 lanes depending where you're cutting it along that corridor. So cutting one lane, it's still going to be 4 to 6 lanes. And those pictures of the town center, they're beautiful, but I don't think many of them have a 4 to 6 lane road cutting straight through the middle of them. I think they're much more manageable roadways. I didn't see any in the pictures, and I would assume that wouldn't be a feature of those neighborhoods.
Sure.
And I get the state's concerns, but 11, when you go south of Mattydale, it's 1 lane each way. I can't think what the name of that big factory is, by 7th North. There's a huge industrial factory there, tons of truck traffic.
Cross Hines.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
And it's 1 lane each way.
Mhm.
And then when you get north of Mattydale to North Syracuse, it's 1 lane each way again. And I know the highway probably complicates things, but it seems like capacity, Mattydale wouldn't be the limiting factor if it was 1 lane with a roundabout. And also you could preserve or even enhance the median, which I think was the state's other concern. If it was, I know roundabouts here, people don't really like them, but I love them from an efficiency standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that the roadway would be, near its capacity. Again, if we had all this development happening, I think it should be near its capacity because it's a bunch of pavement, and that's not necessarily, we don't want surplus, at least me, I don't want surplus roadway in the middle of my community. So I guess to sum it up, my level of interest in continuing to invest and investing more money would be enhanced by this project. It would be enhanced even more by a more aggressive project, including my interest in seeking funding from outside stakeholders. Again, I already own 2 commercial properties. Love to have the chance to expand. When people say, is the commercial interest there? I'd be a lot more interested. I'm a small fish comparatively, but I would personally be more interested in expanding investment in the area if this project went through, and even if it was more aggressive than what was proposed.
No, I think that's outstanding feedback. And I think it's a very important point. I think the initial hypothesis was whether or not the US 11 corridor is currently over-engineered or overbuilt, so to speak, for the level of traffic volume that currently uses it. And then again, the question being, if you were to look out to the year 2050 under a full build assessment, would that still be the case? And of course, the model results suggest that that would be the case. That it's still excess capacity. And even when you reduce the travel lane, there's still excess capacity. And what happens is the lane reduction, by reducing a travel lane in each direction, it makes it more challenging for people who are just using US 11 to cut through. Those who are not bored, they're not starting in Mattydale, nor are they destined to stop and shop, so to speak, in Mattydale. Those are just cutting through. What it does is it makes it more challenging for them. And by more challenging, meaning it might add a little bit of additional time to their commute. And even a few seconds can change how the model will predict how people will go. So it will change traffic patterns under a lane reduction scenario with the 1 lane in each direction. And some of that cut through traffic that's just using Mattydale and not really investing in Mattydale and stopping and shopping, they would go to their destinations via other routes. So it was not modeled to see what would happen under 2 lanes reduction in each direction. I can't necessarily guess what would the results of the model would say from that, because sometimes the model shows surprising results. But so far, if you reduce it in 1 lane, traffic reduces through the corridor. That cut through traffic goes away, and you still have plenty of excess capacity. I don't know the numbers offhand off the top of my head, but I mean, we're nowhere near. I think there's still like 70% remaining capacity in the network under that lane reduction. So to your point, it might be possible to reduce the number of travel lanes by 2. However, again, we didn't model that. That wasn't the initial question in as far as we wanted to take it. But I think your point is very valid and very well taken. And I don't really have much to add beyond that, other than I think it's an outstanding comment, and it's good to hear from a business owner of the corridor too, because it's not uncommon for there to be this perception or misconception sometimes that more traffic is better. Sometimes more traffic makes turning movements into and out of businesses challenging and precludes people from actually shopping and stopping and so forth. So sometimes less is more. And I think that's what you're suggesting here is reduce the road down to where it is actually near capacity. And by doing that, you actually slow traffic, you improve the business environment, and you make it actually easier and safer for people to get out and walk by having, because think about cities are pretty busy places. You know, there's cars coming and going down all the roads all the time, and people are out walking around and shopping and stuff. So,
I really couldn't agree more with what you just said. And I think it's outside of the scope of this study, I'm sure, but when you look at that roadway, I mean, it's 35 miles per hour. I would say the median rate or the median speed through there is probably closer to 50. So your ability, if someone's going the other way from the side that your business is on, they better, you either one, know where they're going and want to get there, or really decide quickly they want to go to your business. There's no kind of like, again, use North Syracuse as an example. It's right nearby. It's a much more conducive environment for most businesses. I mean, I suppose some businesses might have different needs, but yeah, you're not going to benefit from that through traffic as it is now in most businesses, because they're in a hurry and you're going to be, flying by at 50 miles an hour, 8 lanes away. It might as well not be there. So I would totally agree with that statement.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the heart of the town's vision that they've expressed. I mean, they really, what's been told to us is they would like to see it as more of a town center. And I think everything that we're talking about right now is, the principles and the concepts behind that is like, you're taking kind of like the first step in that direction, and versus accommodating just the vehicle traffic and moving people who are commuting longer distances to and from locations. Now we're establishing more of a neighborhood vision for the community. Let's really make this road work for those who live here and want to work and shop and live close by. So I think that's the value of some of the findings from the model as things currently stand. So it does suggest that, you can start taking steps in the lane reduction, whether it's, starting with the 1, maybe in the future it could be more, but there's a lot of other expensive engineering elements that come into play once you start looking into some of those other changes as well. So, but
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? I don't know if anybody's queued up.
Yes. Nick Pero, if you should have a request to unmute.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's more of a comment. It's not obviously a question, but I would just like to point out to obviously the participants here. I mean, obviously, Mike, what the SMTC has been able to do with this corridor study, and Dan Cicerelli as well, who's on the call, what he was able to do over the past I don't know, period of time helping out with this corridor study has been, I think, extremely beneficial for Salina and the community. I would like to make a point that fortunately for us here in Salina, we have an opportunity, I think, not necessarily with the roadways, but we have an opportunity when it comes to the businesses along this stretch to kind of make an investment to drive, I guess, a facade improvement and exterior improvement to hammer home this town center idea that we've been going on. It was announced last year that there was a $1.25 million Main Street grant for the town of Salina along Brewerton Road in Mattydale. I've made it a commitment since became the town supervisor to start reaching out to businesses about ways that we can improve the facade or the exterior improvements. And I think doing that with what your corridor study has shown, making that kind of a backdrop of this is something that we would like to see our town, this individual roadway move into, could help all around. So, Ben, you were talking about how you have a couple different businesses, and I know I was listening to Dominic and I was listening to Jennifer talk about Lemoyne Ave. While this is a concept, this is also something that we should, as a community, strive for. And the financial backing that we have from the county, these are investments that I want to see, hopefully, to allow us to start moving in that direction. So, like I said, it wasn't really necessarily a question. It was more of a comment, and also to let the folks on this call know that we have money and we have an opportunity to kind of steer this individual corridor into what you guys have done as an opportunity for us in the future. So again, thank you for that. And for the individuals on the call, your input is extremely important, especially knowing because of the funds that we have. It's extremely important to allow us to figure out where we can put these funds for this corridor and how we can continue to develop it.
Thank you. Yeah, we take comments too, not just questions.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. And thank you to Daniel as well for his participation. Of course, he's a third ward counselor, so we appreciate all of his feedback and insight throughout this process as well. Megan, are there others? Yep, I see the hand.
Actually, Daniel has his hand up. Oh, 1 second. Where'd you go? There. And you should be able to unmute.
All right. Yeah. So to kind of go off that a little bit, I just want to, thank all the residents that have been involved. I mean, my key thing is everything I brought to every meeting was comments from the community specifically. So a lot of this stuff that we came up with was based off of specific comments from the community. So it wasn't just us kind of, hey, let's think of the craziest thing that we can do and put it together. It was, what do the residents want? How do we incorporate that into this? And then also on top of that, how do we expand on top of that as well to see, what is the craziest things that we can come up with as well. So definitely want to thank, everybody involved with the study, and then all the residents who have given their comments. And like Nick said, there's definitely a lot of pieces that are coming together right now. And this study, it couldn't have happened at a more perfect time.
Thank you for that and for your participation in the study.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Daniel.
No other hands up at the moment. No other chats. Anybody want to ask anything else or comment on anything else?
I've got a question I'll throw out there. One of the discussion points at our meetings has been the Bear Trap Creek Trail and the possibility of extending that in some shape or form. The town has expressed interest in extending it to the north up into the town of Clay, certainly to the south into the city of Syracuse. And SMTC has actually done another study. It's the retail market area mobility study. So that's down by Carousel Mall, or Destiny USA, the regional market and so forth. We did a plan for down there, and it did look at the Bear Trap Creek Trail as an asset that it would like to tie into. The town has expressed that interest as well. I'm just curious to hear from the community if there's any thoughts on that. We're showing it extending to the north up along US 11 towards South Bay Road underneath the I-81 facility, and then We also show within some of the concepts, perhaps doing a side path along the eastern side of US 11, and also possibly routing it down Roxborough Road into the neighborhood. So I don't know how much people paid attention to how those connect, but if there's any feedback on that, I certainly welcome any thoughts, whether it's a good idea, bad idea. It's certainly something we would like to state whether or not the public was interested in these ideas.
Yeah, one comment that says, I would be greatly in favor of that.
Excellent. Okay.
Jennifer raised her hand. Should be able to unmute.
All right, I was gonna type, but it's just easier. I am not a biker, but I am very much in favor of that. I know we have a lot of people in the community that bike and don't drive. And then there's also teenagers. I think that would be a great access thing. I am not in favor of the bike path being directly part of the road. I would like some separation for safety reasons. Just the line that indicates a bike path. I don't like those.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's just, personal preference.
Okay. Thank you. And Deb Cody, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of you. This is a great timely study and really, really interesting to see. And thank you, Daniel and Nick. And that was going to be my question about the trail, because I know Daniel and I had met a while back and kind of walked the trail. And we were thinking of some, the potential of that trail and how great it would be to extend that. So can we at some point see, what the potential is for getting that? I'm trying to envision like how that would go up to Clay. And then also if there's any potential for that to tie into the Loop the Lake Trail.
Yeah, those are outstanding questions. Going to the south, starting with that, the RTC market area mobility study comes up with a couple of high-level ideas about making those connections, and that could somehow tie into an extension of the Loop the Lake, as well as the Onondaga Creek Walk Trail that's down there. And from there, you can get to, of course, the Empire State Trail and so on. So all those trail networks are now being tied and woven together. So the Bear Trap Creek Trail being such a wonderful established resource, it just dead ends to the north and south and doesn't have any of those connections. So that the study to the south, there has not been a study that looked at the specifics of how you would do that connection, but there are some high level ideas that have been documented as part of the RTC market area mobility study. Same with going to the north. What this study is showing is that because we know that you can, in theory, reduce the number of travel lanes and still maintain the capacity, what that is suggesting to us then is that you could, if you were to put a side path along US 11 to make the connection to the north and go underneath 81, that would occur on the eastern side of US 11 with that northbound travel lane removed. There's challenges with doing that because you've got to cross a high-speed on-ramp to I-81 northbound, and then you would have to continue underneath the bridge structures there and make your way into South Bay Road. So the specifics of the designs have not been worked out because, again, this is just high-level planning. But in addition to this study that now documents that, back in, I believe it was 2013, our agency did a study on behalf of the New York State Department of Transportation. That study was a bike commuter corridor study. The premise behind that is we looked at two major employment centers, downtown University and University Hill, and how would you connect the outer laying areas 7 or 8 miles out to these areas that are the central business district of downtown in University Hill with all the hospitals and employment there. So it looked at what roads could potentially serve as bike commuters bike commuter corridor as part of that network. And it does look at this exact location as making an improvement. And in that, it does have some suggestions for some ideas, but again, they're high level. There's nothing been down to the design and engineering level. So those types of specifics would have to be worked out. But there are a number of planning documents and studies now that all kind of are starting to say the same thing, which provides additional support for these kind of ideas to move forward. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but there's definitely been a lot of thought about making all these connections to the Loop the Lake Trail from this location, to the Onondaga Creek Walk and beyond. So, and then certainly to the north.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, Dominic has a question again, so you should be able to unmute, Dominic.
So the only thing I wanted to just touch on, Mike kind of touched on it already, about obviously I was going to mention the underpass there for the bike trail. I'm for it. I mean, I think it's really cool. I think it will also bring a lot of, more traffic that you normally wouldn't get through Mattydale, because now people would be basically, even if they wanted to walk, they could do that too, walk, run, bike. And then if, obviously if we're trying to make this more business oriented, like a village kind of setting, or like the township kind of setting, then this would really help, bring that extra traffic in as well. I don't know. I mean, obviously, when I went to Vegas, they had like those bridges that you could literally like walk over from, you're walking over 8 lanes from one side of the street to the other. People were like bringing their bikes up there. They could, some of them were ramps, some of them were stairs. Just an idea, something like that. I don't know if that could be like something incorporated, but I do think that this is something that should be obviously incorporated along with doing this case study, because if you're going to plan something long term to do something like that, you don't want to wait until afterwards and then try to incorporate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. The bridge that you're referring to, are you, just so that I understand, are you suggesting perhaps a bridge over the I-81 facility?
Not even that. I mean, I think the bridges are high enough that you could even make something where if it's just like a little like walkway pass, you know what I mean? You could essentially make it so it's, it can go up and over just underneath the bridge. You know what I mean? To go like way up and over, I don't know if that's really something that would be, cost effective or even could be done. But even just something that could just kind of get you up and over, so you're out of way of traffic and, you're off to the side, you're not up in, right next to it per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'd have to think about whether that would fit in that area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you. Benjamin?
Okay, so I usually don't speak much in these kinds of things, but this is something that I guess you're hitting my wish list, because I use the Bear Trap Creek Walkway a lot, and I also like the Onondaga Lake Park, and also the Creek Walk downtown, which is now connected. And it's always kind of bothered me that there's not actually a human mobility powered way to access the city that I would consider safe. So if you walk or bike or run, there's pretty much no way that I've been able to find, at least, that doesn't get pretty dicey pretty fast. But I've always thought if you just connected that last maybe mile and a half, it can't even be 2 miles between where Bear Trap lets out at 7th North Street and where the Creek Walk ends behind the mall at Onondaga Lake. If you just connected that along that creekway, it would change the nature of Bear Trap, the Bear Trap Creek Trail. So I would really support it. I think it'd be good for the community too. And, to the greatest extent you can make bike trails or walking or lanes, in Mattydale, I think it'd be great for, people who are maybe not thought of, when there's car-centric development. So lower income, people with disabilities, elderly, children, elderly and children, that is, to make it really a town that works for everybody, not just people who are lucky enough to have a car to hop in whenever they want to go somewhere. So I would really support any of those initiatives too.
Outstanding. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, Benjamin. Yeah. I know when we were looking at the RTC mobility study that the city was one of the study advisory committee members, and they were very much in favor of the concept of extending the Bear Trap Creek Trail south into the city and providing access to the regional market for the food and into, Destiny USA for the shopping and so on. You got the ballpark, you've got a lot of access there. Plus it would also serve city residents because there's the north side has got a lot of folks that commute up to Liverpool, Baldwinsville, believe it or not, and likely Mattydale, but I don't know for sure, via bike, to work at various service jobs and stuff. So that would provide some opportunities there. So there's multiple stakeholders that have been discussing this idea for a while, and everybody's very much in support of this. So these studies, the RTC study looked at both on-road and off-road options and documented just at very high level as a narrative, like some of these ideas that could be considered. And as part of doing so, we also discovered an underutilized trail that is over by Lay Creek by Park Street down there. There's a trail segment that was built perhaps we're not 100% sure of the history behind it, whether or not it's part of if it was meant to connect to the Bear Trap Creek Trail eventually or not, but it's an off-road trail that's just north of the CSX railroad tracks over there. And so there was even some ideas thought about how that could perhaps connect into things. And that's not far from where other development is occurring at the candle factory in the town of Salina as well. So I just point that out because that could be a connection potentially for that project. So that's something for the town to certainly keep in mind as far as improving mobility, because that could provide any of the residents at the candle factory should that continue to develop and evolve down into the city. So
we have 2 more hands up and we're starting to push 8 o'clock. So
yeah, okay.
We'll call on these 2. I think we have Kathleen and then back to the supervisor.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I am a Central New York L. Frank Baum historian, and I've been talking with Daniel and of course with Nick Parro and many others about the area which used to be the roller rink. And that was also it's the frontage property of where Frank Baum lived as a child, called Roselawn. But you have mentioned Bear Trap Creek, and so I just want to say quickly to put a little history in here. Bear Trap Creek, first of all, I would say behind the apartment buildings next to the Roxborough schools, that particular area was in Frank Baum's backyard. And he talks about it in his book, Wonderful Wizard of Oz. He calls it a murmuring brook. And I just think it's wonderful to kind of note these great things that happened there. And so, I'm forgive me, I'm thinking too fast. But I just wanted to say, not a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for including the history, because it is very important that people know these things. And when people come to visit, I think it's just a great thing for them to be able to say, wow, I know the movie The Wizard of Oz, or I know the book The Wizard of Oz, and it just happens to come from here. That's all I wanted to say. And thank you to everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah.
All right. And Nick, you should be able to unmute.
Yes. So I was listening to Ben talk, and then Mike, you kind of followed up on it, and it was interesting. You mentioned the candle factory, and it's very simple. I would like, Ben to know, and others with the Bear Trap Creek Trail. We very much are looking at extending it down into the Loop the Lake, adding a connection into the Syracuse regional market as well. That is ironically, I had probably talked with only 2 other people about it, but that is something that is on the list of something that we're looking at. There are improvements that are being made to Old Liverpool Road, completely separate from this project. There's improvements that are being made to Old Liverpool Road, along with the Parkway, that are going to possibly provide opportunities for us to extend the Bear Trap Creek Trail into those parts of the town that might be able to link Mattydale all the way up to the village of Liverpool, as well as down into the city. So Ben, if that's something you're interested in, you should be excited about that. And then obviously, Kathleen, you had just mentioned the murmuring brook. That's exciting. I just wanted to let you know that just made me smile a little bit, just because it's always nice to hear those type of things with the town of Salina. But it was really just talking about the Bear Trap Creek Trail and the extension and where those connections are going. That is something that is have been discussed, very, very beginning discussions, but we are looking at extending that in that direction as well. So Ben and others should be looking forward to that.
That makes me excited to hear too, Supervisor. So thank you for sharing that information. That's excellent. And, to Kathleen's point, anytime we can celebrate local history, I think that is a wonderful thing to do. So we're very happy to be able to point out any of this information in the report.
And Deb Cody has another question.
It's not so much a question. I just wanted to, that is so exciting. The whole possibility of getting that creek down to the Loop the Lake Trail, to the creek walk. And I just want to put in a plug for the potential aquarium that we would have down in the inner harbor and the additional development that would come, from that, and how cool that would be to be able to, to get down there and access all of that from here. That's just super exciting to me. So thank you. We're gonna work on all of that. So
thanks.
Good job.
Yeah, I want to thank you too, Deb, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your support and for providing your comments and thoughts as well. So thank you.
So I was going to put into the chat. I know I put this in at the beginning, and then some people I think weren't on yet. Just before we wrap up, if you are not on our email list yet, please sign up for that, because then you will get our newsletter we send out every other month, and you'll get announcements about other meetings and things that may be of interest. So highly encourage you to sign up for that or follow our Facebook page. Anything else? Don't see any other hands up at the moment. No other chats coming in. Mike, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time tonight to come and to watch the video, to listen to all the different information. I know that this was a lot of information to listen to, and I sincerely appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do this, because it just makes the product all the better in the end. It's helpful information, hopefully for the town and for the various road owners to consider in the future. So thank you for this. As I mentioned, this process is ongoing, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. If you have any questions, you could call me or send me an email. And we do anticipate having this study completed by the summer. And again, all the comments and thoughts that were discussed tonight will be documented in the final report. So if there's anything that you would like to look into in the future with the report, you just be aware that will have all this information in it as well. At the very end, what we anticipate doing when the report is drafted and it's ready for public review, what we typically do is we post it on our website for a period of time. And then it's just, if you have any comments or thoughts that you would like to submit, at that point, you could just directly email them in. It's pretty straightforward from that process. So we take the input tonight, we just finalize things, we tweak things as needed, and then and that's the last opportunity to provide the comments once it goes on our website. So again, as Megan mentioned, if you're on our listserv, you'll get notifications of that when that's available. And certainly, the town will disseminate that information as well through its social media. So thank you, Daniel, for doing all the outreach and the supervisor and so forth. So, but that's it. So thank you again.
And I put Mike's email address in the chat. And you can always email us at contact@smtcmpo.org about this or other transportation planning questions that you might have.
No, and all the studies that I was referencing tonight, all of our studies are posted on our website. So if you wanted to look at the RTC study or the 2013 bike commuter corridor study, all those documents are published on our website. So, and when this study is acknowledged as complete through our internal committee structures, it will also be posted to our website and publicly available. So.
Yeah, and I put the RTC
Oh, great. Yeah.
link in the
Yep, I
chat
see that.
already.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yep.
Wonderful. So thank you all again so very much for taking the time tonight to be with us and to share your thoughts and comments. So we look forward to hearing from you if there's any other thoughts. So thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Oh, I thought there was